Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Ryan, and today I'm joined by
Nerdarchy Ted.
And today we're here with Brian Stillman, the maker of a handful of documentaries that are very much in our niche that you're going to want to check out. So we have Eye of the Beholder that's in the works.
Hey guys, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
So today we're here with Brian Stillman, the maker of a handful of documentaries that are very much in our niche that you're going to want to check out. So we have Eye of the Beholder that's in the works right now.
Yeah, in production.
And in production we have The Art of D&D.
Well, no, those are the same. Eye of the Beholder, The Art of Dungeons and Dragons.
Subtitle,
yes.
Right. And then there's the one with the Star Wars action figures.
Plastic Galaxy, the story of Star Wars toys.
Yeah, so those sound really cool. So first, I guess for our audience, do we want to talk about the Eye of the Beholder, Art of D&D documentary and the process behind that?
Sounds good. That's a broad opening salvo.
3 minutes, go!
Okay. We're doing this movie called Eye of the Beholder, The Art of Dungeons and Dragons. I am a longtime gamer. I've been gaming since, I don't know, early 80s. And I've always loved the art. You know, as much as I've loved the game, I'd buy the books to flip through and check out all these awesome artists. And it occurred to me that maybe other people feel the same way. And it'd be an interesting topic to explore because it's had this effect not just on D&D, but also on fantasy art. You know, until Magic the Gathering came along, the repository of fantasy art was D&D. You know, that kept fantasy art alive through the 80s, I think. It provided an outlet for anyone who likes monsters and cool stuff. So there's sort of a lot going on there.
Well, I mean, when you look at so many of the creatives in the video game industry, in Hollywood, visual artists, almost all of them that have a sort of fantasy bent have a history of Dungeons and Dragons in their lineage from the 80s. Like Tony DiTerlizzi was like looking through the manuals. He's like, I could do the next version of this, the next iteration. So
he actually would redraw art. Like as a kid, he would redraw the art in the old monster manuals and stuff. As a little kid, learning to draw this stuff. I don't know how little he was, but and that led to this career. He still has those old drawings. It's like, it's a displacer beast, you know, or whatever. It looks just like out of the monster manual. I didn't know you were working back then. He's like, no, I was a kid and I drew that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I actually remember reading a piece that like his friends were like, you could probably do that better. Like it's actually the rib, and then like he, I guess he went to school for graphic design, but it was before illustration was a common thing where you would have a degree in that because a lot of early illustrators are graphic designers. But yeah, it's really cool. Actually, his art in like the second edition Dungeons & Dragons Monstrous Manual back in the day for kids at home, was what got me into art. That and like stuff like Labyrinth and just fantasy novel covers, because those are just like lush and beautiful too.
Well, we're interviewing him. I don't know when this will go out into the world, but we are interviewing him early March. So he's on the thing, on our list, and he was the guy we wanted from the very beginning. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
The great thing about the D&D art is I don't have quite the rich gaming history that you do, but I've been gaming for well over 2 decades at this point in time, and I have the iterations of the D&D books throughout 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th. And you can see the iteration. You can see, okay, well, they've taken something from as simple as a 2D black and white drawing to now I'm going to have this very three-dimensional, colorful art that is just like, this is amazing. You know, when you actually flip through those pages.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes even, forget, second edition. If you go back to first edition, it was even sort of rougher, although there's some great artists working at that time. But then you go back to the original D&D, the white box and the wood grain box. And the art in that is actually swiped from, some of it is swiped from Doctor Strange comics. The artists working on it actually lifted art, stuck it in there, and eventually they got like cease and desist letters, and they had to like scrap that and quickly replace it. So the cover of the wood grain box, the very earliest version of D&D, is different than the cover of the white box, which was like 2 printings later, although still very, very early. Because they were like, maybe we can't just outright steal our art from Marvel. And they replaced it all and whatever. So yeah, there's at least for certain, one panel from Doctor Strange 169, which was actually the first issue of Doctor Strange after it went from Strange Tales to Doctor Strange. They just swiped it, slapped it on the cover of this thing.
I mean, that was
kind of crazy.
That was done in a time frame when they didn't know how big their product was going to be. You know, they were like, well, if we just get this out there, you know, we've got something.
Yeah.
Whereas now the term Dungeons and Dragons is known by, you know, millions and millions of people who don't even give a crap about what it actually is, let alone those that actually play it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the startups where they kind of launch an imperfect product and then like go back and revise because legally they have to.
That's that, and it's also, you know, games get played and the act of playing them is the act of play testing them, you know what I mean? So the game develops as you play it. People start to realize, well, this thing doesn't quite work, or this doesn't quite work. So they're gonna come up with new additions, and then you're gonna pull in new art, and you want to sort of modernize it. You know, the first big shift that I can think of in terms of the art really developing. Certainly through the early years, you had amazing artists. Bill Willingham, who's probably more known today as the writer of the comic book Fables, was an early D&D artist for those early modules, and his stuff's amazing. You had Jeff D, you had Diesel of Force, you had Dave Sutherland, Errol Otis, Dave Trampier. These guys doing all this amazing art. Jim Rosloff, who I love. They were doing stuff up through first edition AD&D, and then they decided to recover those books. Originally they had the Dave Trampier and Dave Sutherland art for the Monster Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Player's Handbook. But then they brought in Jeff Easley, and they put out first edition with new covers by Jeff Easley, these classic covers that kind of a lot of people, my age at least, grew up with. Those are ones they had the orange spines on the book and kind of became known, and then they put out like Unearthed Arcana and all the other things, and Jeff Easley became known as doing those covers. And there was this jump. I loved the early art before Jeff Easley, but there was definitely a jump in artistic sophistication when Easley came in, and you got Larry Elmore and Keith Parkinson and Clyde Caldwell. They all came in around the same time. I don't know what it was, but they had a certain level of training. It felt less like fans who were really freaking good, and more like guys who are kind of professional artists. Which again isn't to say. I mean, Errol Otis, one of the early ones, his stuff's amazing. Jim Roslov, amazing illustrator. Willingham, Diesel, all these people were great. Janelle Jaques, amazing. But something shifted when those other guys came in. That sort of second wave of big artists at TSR. And they're all part of the in-house studio system that they had. It wasn't freelancers. They used freelancers, but they had an actual art department. Guys set up on
like
easels.
a bullpen. Like Brom was there. Like Brom was there learning his craft from the first generation. Like legit people from when TSR. I guess it's like from that point of being indie to like then they start to become a corporation and maybe attract like top tier talent.
Kind of. They had money. I mean, Larry Elmore told me the story. They recruited him before they got the others, before they got Easley and Caldwell and Parkinson. And they came to him, and he was working as an artist and an illustrator for the military. He worked at Fort Knox, and he was he would do like all their signage and training manuals and all those sort of weird things. He would paint, you know, if they need a landscape painting to hang somewhere, he painted that stuff. And one of the Bloom brothers, either Kevin or Brian, I forget which, they were Gary Gygax's partner at Dungeons and Dragons. By then, Dave Arneson, who helped form the company, had left, so it was Gary and the two Blooms. They were all early investors. One of the Blooms flew to Kentucky to find Larry Elmore, and they said, "We really love your stuff. We want to hire you." And Larry's like, "Well, you know, I got wife and we just bought a house and I'm making pretty good money and I've got this career and because it's government there'll be this big pension." And they're like, "Well, we'll pay you this much." And it was like this insane amount of money. And Larry's like, "Okay." You know, they were willing to invest a ton of money in art because from the stories I've heard, Gary Gygax really appreciated the power of art and sort of the push because he was into pulps and there was all this pulp art, you know, old Conan stuff and amazing stories, all that stuff going back to the 30s and 40s and 50s. So they're willing to invest in it and do it right, and it paid off.
Yeah, I mean the covers of books sell books. Like everybody knows
Yeah,
that's a publisher of fiction, like fantasy fiction, or even like romance novels. Like there's a sort of trope of the thing that you expect, and like that cover really, I bet that was a secret to the sauce, and they to make it blow up in the 80s like it did is they really did invest in the art.
I know when I look at a novel, that's one of my 3 tests of okay, is this is this worth picking up and reading? And it's like, okay, I look at the cover art. If it doesn't sell me on it, I'm probably going to put it down.
Right, but you can't judge a book by its cover. I mean, it's a trite phrase, but it's true. I mean, crappy cover could still be a really good book.
And it happens
but it
all
has
the
to
time.
get you to pick it off the shelf.
Right.
It has to at least be good enough where it catches your eye.
Right.
You know, and they did recognize that, and the art. You know, they had to convince the booksellers to carry it, and the booksellers say, "Well, how are people going to pick this up? This weird game." You flipping through the book is not going to sell you on it because it's like I don't understand what the hell I'm looking at.
It's essentially it's a book with math and like a little bit
tables
of
and charts,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, the art is going to catch your eye, and the art's going to inspire you. But it wasn't just to do that; it was there to inspire the games. So if you're sitting there, so the art. Role-playing art in general but
captures your
D&D.
imagination. It
Well,
gets you.
but it's doing something that no other art, except possibly religious art of all things, is expected to do. So the art of a book cover is there to sell the book and maybe give you a sense of what's in the book, but it's showing you one little moment, maybe. Comic book art, sequential storytelling, it's telling a story visually, all right? That's fine. Role-playing art, let's say we're playing a game and I say you're attacked by a Tarrasque. And you're going,
Oh, shit.
What's a Tarrasque? Yeah, right. Right, but if you don't know that, you're going, what's a Tarrasque? You don't even know how to envision it. You don't know how to encounter it. You don't know how to deal with it. Or a beholder. You know, if I tell you, well, it's a floating ball with an eye in the middle and 10 eye stalks around it, you're thinking of one thing, you're thinking of another thing, I'm thinking of another thing, because this thing doesn't exist. We have no point of reference. Well, gaming art is designed to create a shared reality that we have. So that when you say, okay, I'm going to dive under the spikes, get around to the side of the thing, and do this thing with the stalk, you know what he's talking about because you have the same picture in your head. Religious art had to do that too, because they're talking about heaven and hell and angels and demons and whatever. Well, you want your audience to know what we're all talking about. So you create this shared universe. But nothing else does that. Comic books don't do that because you don't have to share the comic with someone else. You and I don't have to be on the same page. Right. We don't have to be on the same page after tossing the book. So it's creating a virtual reality before there's virtual reality. Like you say, it is supposed to also inspire it. You're supposed to flip open the book, see this amazing painting, and think, I can adventure in that world. Totally segging into something random here. It just occurred to me. This is not actually linked to my previous thought, but I got this great story about these guys who would go to Walden Books. Walden Books still existed. They'd go to the gaming section because that was the only place to see monster art. You know, they're into monsters, they're into dragons, they're into all these fantastic creatures. So they go to Walden Books because there are no museums then, there's no internet then, there are no things that we all have, or books of monsters. And you grab a D&D book for the sole reason of flipping through. To be like, oh, look at this cool thing. And they didn't even care about the game. And I find that fascinating. You know, that was kind of place to go.
And there's a lot of people who have picked up those books solely because the art is cool.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes people transition into the game, other times people,
sometimes they don't.
People don't.
Right.
Now we live in a world where art books are a thing. You
Yeah.
can just be like, oh, I want to look at fantasy art books. I got half a dozen at home.
Right.
I can just be like, all right, well, let's look at this.
Well, D&D even did that early. They put out their Art of D&D books. You know, they recognize people are like into this stuff, and so we can put out calendars and we can put out, you know, posters, and we can put out Art of D&D books.
So, do you have anything that you might want to, you know, or that you feel comfortable enough teasing to our audience?
So there's a great story that Brom told us and Larry Elmore told us.
Brom stories are just like always fantastic. Like I hear
Yeah.
them on podcasts, always fantastic.
From Brom and Larry talked about it as well. It's actually about Larry Elmore. They would get assignments back then that they had to turn around really quickly. So sometimes they would have, you know, weeks and weeks to work on a cover painting or however much time they needed. But sometimes it's like we need something for marketing really quickly. And they knew if they gave it to marketing, eventually it would find its way into a product and they wouldn't get to go back and work on it again. And when you rush stuff, you don't get to put, as Brom said, you don't get to put a little sign on it saying, by the way, I had to rush this, and that's why it's terrible.
Yeah, everybody just judges you by the piece.
Right,
Yeah,
they just assume whatever. So Larry started signing things Jack Fred for the stuff that he didn't want his name attached to. And a few other artists would do it too, so like Keith Parkinson, there are a couple out there. So if you see stuff that's out there that you're like, that kind of looks like Larry Elmore, that kind of looks like Keith Parkinson's, who's this Jack Fred dude? It's them, and Jack Fred became the like
their toss-off persona.
Yeah, it became the Alan Smithy of like the D&D art world.
That is
so
really cool.
I always like looking for those. I found a couple.
That's pretty hysterical.
And then another story. I haven't corroborated this one yet, so I'm not gonna. I'll tell you a different story.
Okay,
no, I'll tell you a different story. Jeff Easley. Jeff Easley is one of my favorite painters. A lot of covers for the first edition stuff, pretty much all of them. And so these guys gamed, but not as much as you'd think. So some of the early guys were gamers. So Diesel and Jeff D and Jim Rosloff, that sort of first wave of black and white artists and some color artists. Willingham gamed a lot. But the next wave, the Easley and Larry Elmore and Parkinson, these guys, they didn't come from a gaming background. They came from an art background. They got hired to do this art. But they got into it, and they kind of wanted to be part of it. So Jim Rosloff was running this game, and Easley and Parkinson and Elmore are all playing in it. Probably Clyde Caldwell as well. And Easley didn't really know what he was doing. So he's playing a wizard, and he had Fireball. And he didn't really know how it worked, wasn't really worried about it. And they go into this room, and it's like a 20 by 20 room or something, and they get attacked by something. So Jeff is like, cast Fireball, in this sort of low-key Jeff Easley way. And everyone's like, no! Killed the whole party, killed his own character, and that was that. He never played again. He's like, I'm done. That was it.
Yeah, and that's how many great D&D games begin and end.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I mean, and that's the big thing being said for almost, I would say, I guess we could call them like third wave Dungeons and Dragons artists like Todd Lockwood or Tony DiTerlizzi. Like those guys have history with gaming, but they're not. It's not really the thing they get up to. It doesn't seem like they don't often game. It's not a part of their everyday life.
Right. It isn't. DiTerlizzi. I mean, these are guys who are also busy. You know?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you guys know it takes a lot of time to have a regular D&D game.
And syncing schedules up with a bunch of adults.
Exactly. And they all have very busy schedules, and I think they'd like to play.
Yeah. Their career kind of took them.
Yeah, and they have families and everything else.
Doing that. Yeah.
We're interviewing a guy named Donato Giancola.
Oh yeah,
who's
Donato.
Famous.
Yeah.
Paperback and book cover illustrator.
His rendering will give you tears to your eyes.
Yeah,
like,
he's
it's
amazing.
Just, you can see skin pores. Like,
He's probably one of the top artists working in like book covers and stuff. He does a lot of science fiction.
He does
and
some
fantasy.
magic stuff too.
Yeah,
well.
he's done very little D&D though, but he's a huge D&D fan.
Yeah.
And he said as a kid he used to game, and he goes, and it's funny because we're interviewing him not as a D&D artist but as a fan, and he said, well, you know, Brian, when I was growing up I used to draw my own maps. I'm like, oh yeah, we used to draw our own maps too. He's like, no, you don't understand. I used to draw my own graph paper to draw the maps on because I couldn't find graph paper big enough, so I'd find these huge sheets of paper and I'd meticulously draw out the lines. I was like, dude,
insane.
That's a little crazy.
Yeah,
He's like, but I still have my first maps. I was like, awesome. And you live like 10 minutes from me, so we were going to your house and I want to see all your crazy stuff.
Is that in the documentary?
It will be. We're shooting that in a couple weeks. And I've invited, I was like, listen, we just lost a guy at our table. And if you ever want to play, you're certainly welcome, Donato, if you want to play at our table.
Yeah.
And we were chatting. I was like, I always ask people, were you the guy at the table who had to draw everyone's characters for them and stuff? And a lot of them were like, well, sometimes. And then, and I told Donato, I was like, yeah, we happen to be losing the guy at our table who draws everyone's stuff. He's like, oh, that's why you're inviting me. You just want me to draw your stuff. I was like, no, but if you're offering.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's ever gonna play with us. Hi, Donato. But yeah. So these guys were into it.
So when do you see, or when did you say that the documentary's going to be available?
I did not say
Because it's very much.
it's like that's always the worst question because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't mean the worst question. I mean like the question that caused me the most like
Anxiety.
heart palpitations.
I don't mean to cause heart palpitations. Don't die on camera.
Right, that'd be awesome. That'd
No,
be
no, it
sweet.
wouldn't.
The last interview of Brian
as a
Stillman
doc-
was an unfinished documentary. You heard it first. Nerdarchy exclusive.
As a documentary maker, death on camera, that's score.
You can't go any
That's
better
the
than
get.
that, yeah.
But no, we're in production right now. We shot a lot. We have interviews all sorts of people, but there are a lot of people we still want to interview. People who I think are necessary to telling the story, or who are people that other people expect to be in it, and if they're not, I guarantee even if we have everybody else, their comment will be like, "Why didn't I see whoever?" It's like
You lose credibility at that point, yeah.
So these are people we want to at least talk to, whether they get in the film or not. Who knows? Because this thing's not going to be 8 hours long.
Yeah.
But we are starting to edit now. Also, like with the stuff we've got, we're starting to build structure and figure out what this film is. So, in a perfect world, I'd love to have it done early 2018. So a year to finish shooting and editing. I don't know though. I can't commit to that because I kept saying with my other film, I keep saying things like that and be like, okay, well maybe the next year, Okay, finally it's done, and you just don't know. You don't know where these things are going to go.
So if our fans out there do want to follow along with
Sure.
progress or teasers, can they look you up on Facebook?
We are
website?
We are on Facebook. Eye of the Beholder movie. Very easy. Eye of the Beholder movie. We have a trailer that's up that we're pretty happy with. A little teaser trailer. There are people you expect to see who are not in the teaser trailer. That's why it's a teaser trailer. We promise they're probably in the movie. We put this thing out and we get 2 comments. That was awesome. Where's Larry Elmore? We're interviewing him in a week. He's gonna be there. We promise. We are probably going to put some version on this cruise. We've got some clips that we've cut together just to sort of show little interesting bits here and there. We're probably gonna put some version of that online once we've refined it a little more. We had a rush to get it done for this. It's about 10 minutes long.
Right, it's a rough cut.
But we'll kind of, not even a rough cut, it's more like this interesting moment jammed into this interesting moment, just to show you stuff. We'll probably refine that and get that online. But the Facebook page is the way to follow along. We have a website, but the Facebook page gets sort of regularly posted
Updated,
too.
and we'll put some links down in the description below as always. So.
Yep. Oh, I should say, it's not just my documentary, and I'm working on it with 2 partners, Seth Polanski and Kelly Slagle. Kelly is a co-producer, co-director, and our editor. Seth is co-producer, co-director, and our sound guy, and our lawyer. Hi, Seth.
It's very important to have your legal department.
Yes.
Indeed.
We only have Nate the Nerdarchy as our barrister, and
Well, this movie could not have happened on my own. I think the amount of energy we're putting into this thing, all 3 of us are sort of putting in this Herculean effort. Kelly destroyed herself to get something done for this cruise, and Seth is on a lot of the shoots with me and asking a whole bunch of questions along with me, and we all sort of have our roles, but it's definitely a group effort.
So I didn't mean to suggest that this was solely your.
Oh no,
project.
I know you didn't. I wanted to make sure I mentioned them though, because I didn't want to just sort of power through and ignore them. They're awesome. They actually have a film called Of Dice and Men, which is not a documentary. It's like a narrative film, sort of a comedy with dramatic elements about gamers. And I was like plugging it because it's what got me back into gaming after it was sort of hiatus, seeing it and being so inspired by it. But it's really freaking funny, and it doesn't make fun of gamers. It's gaming. It's comedy without the self-loathing that a lot of like sort of geek humor has. Like, oh, you have a girlfriend? Audience laughs. It's like,
that's right. Yeah. Not naming any shows or anything like that.
Yeah. I will.
Yeah.
I'm happy to. But their stuff doesn't know that. It's super funny, especially if you're a gamer. You'll watch it and be like, oh my god, that was me. That's awesome. So I do like to make sure that they're mentioned as well. It is a team effort. Team Beholder.
Yeah, there we
Anyway.
go. So, and just tell us down in the comments below, who do you expect to see in an Art of Dungeons & Dragons type movie? You can put that, you can argue it down in the argument section below. Don't forget to like, comment,
We are
share,
getting
subscribe.
to them. Whoever you're putting in that list, we're trying. We're trying.
Don't forget to check us out over on nerdarchy.com.
And until next time, stay
Stay
nerdy.
nerdy.